My name is Ara, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, and today I have a super special guest. She shares a house, we share kids. She's, doing amazing things. Her name is Claudia Ehamparam, and she is my wife of many, many years. Claudia, welcome to the show.
Actually, today I have a very special guest. His name is Ara Ehamparam. Sorry.
She's making fun of the fact that I mess up last names. So funny.
Sorry, did I butcher that? I hope I got that right. He is the co-founder of Continyou Care, a cloud-based platform for senior homes in North America, co-founder of Tamil Culture and My Tamil Date, an online lifestyle publication and trusted dating community, and most recently, the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast of 100 episodes, which this audience has benefited from enjoying. First of all, thank you so much, Ara, for making time in your schedule to join us today. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It wasn't that hard to organize this since we live in the same house.
Second of all, 100 episodes in. Congratulations, babe.
Thank you.
I'm very proud of you. We're happy to share that for this very special episode, we have a new ad with respect to the podcast. Surprise!
This special 100th episode of the Tamil Creator Podcast is sponsored by theonlineactor.com. The Online Actor is a fully online acting training studio that offers group acting classes and private coaching for all experience levels. Whether you're brand new to the industry hoping to learn the basics of acting on camera, or a seasoned professional looking to level up your performance skills, The Online Actor has a training option for you. Visit theonlineactor.com for more details and to observe a training session for free. And now back to the podcast.
For 100 episodes, we have heard you say that you like to start at the beginning. So let's do that and start at the beginning. Tell us about your childhood and formative years in terms of how they played a part in becoming an entrepreneur.
That's a good question. I like to ask this question obviously because of our kids and trying to figure out what we can do to kind of, set them up for success. But, I think my story is similar to a lot of people, I guess, I don't know if we're first or second generation, but, in terms of having immigrant parents, trying to work multiple jobs, often both parents working. In our case, my mom stayed at home with us while my dad was working. I think it was just an environment of like Claudia. We always talk about kind of our different upbringings where me and my siblings are quite independent. And I think it's because we're kind of often left to our own devices just because our parents are so busy and like problem solving. I think that's a big thing of entrepreneurship is like just figuring things out. We just had to figure things out. I don't think our parents pushed us to, but we just had to kind of just figure stuff out on our own. We weren't coddled and, maybe our parents probably would have wanted to, but they were just busy. So just things like when we got sick, it was just it's like that Chris Rock joke of like Robitussin for everything. I think for us it was like Odiclone for everything, or just some kind of Tamil remedy, or just stop playing and just rest, or like all these things that didn't make sense. But that was kind of our childhood of when I think of qualities that make up somebody that can get into entrepreneurship, I think one is being resilient, problem solving, just kind of sticking through things even when things are tough, being part of that childhood of just seeing your parents work hard. I don't know if my siblings had this, but I had this where because our parents couldn't really afford stuff, I think there was one grade I had like 2 blue shirts and I was like nicknamed Moa Blue because I had 2 blue shirts. It sounds cool, but really it's because I didn't have that many shirts. So like looking back, I was like, oh, that actually was kind of sad, but I didn't really notice it. I think it's just all these things you care about when you get older, like they're not really that big of a deal. But I think that's our childhood. And like our parents put us in a lot of stuff. They were busy with work, but my dad, especially me, tried to put me in so much stuff like swimming, piano, karate. I probably hated a lot of that stuff. I appreciate some of it now, but if we're looking back, I wish I was able to be more of a kid like my brothers were able to. I think my brother got into supposed to do like guitar lessons. I think he gave up after like 3 lessons, and the story I shared of like him selling the guitar to Vas versus like I had to stick with piano until like level 8 piano, which is like crazy. So yeah, I think that's our childhood.
Where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I was born in Jaffna. Came here when I was 3, so I don't remember much of Sri Lanka. I see photos. I have no memory. We came and pretty much grew up in Melbourne, so different parts of Melbourne. So 97 Crow Trail for those who used to live in like kind of the Tom Longboat area, then 74 Horseshoe Crescent, then 10 Chad Crescent, and then finally where we live now. So just pretty much like Melbourne, just grew up probably within like a 10-minute driving distance of all the houses in like maybe the 20 plus years I lived in Scarborough. So yeah.
Did your parents come directly to Scarborough?
It's so bad that I don't know this, but I'm pretty sure, but I just don't have those answers.
It wasn't Montreal?
Oh, you mean that? Yes, I think you meant, I guess, in Toronto, but yeah, I think they took the path that I think most people did, which is come to Montreal. There was a time when we used to visit this random French lady in Montreal. I remember we used to go visit her. I had no idea who she was. Now, thinking back, I think she was the one that gave us a place to stay when we first landed. So yeah, a lot of like nice people even back then. I think the sentiment towards immigration was different, but yeah.
Are you the youngest? Are you the eldest? Do you have siblings?
I am the oldest of four. I have two brothers and a sister. My sister is the youngest. There's a 7-year gap between me and her, just like you and Deshane.
Who's your favorite sibling?
Don't have a favorite, but I spend the most time with my sister because I think we have a lot of similar interests. And I think my brothers probably became sick of me as I was probably like a second dad to them growing up. And I think naturally because there's four of us, whenever we played like games, it was 2-on-2. Nobody wanted to play with my sister because she was kind of the baby. So it was just me and her versus always my brother. So I think just naturally over time, that's kind of how it lined, but no favorites.
Actually, I think we have your favorite sister on the phone right now.
Hey, it's your favorite sister calling in to say congratulations. It's mind-blowing to me that you're already on your 100th episode of this podcast. It sounds cliche, but it really does feel like it was just yesterday that you talked about starting this podcast and, putting out a few episodes, and now you're at 100. And it's truly just been inspiring because you have so much going on from your other projects, and not to mention being a dad of twins. So I really admire how passionate and committed you've been to really building this podcast. You've had such a range of awesome guests, some really memorable conversations, and you really made it your own throughout this. So again, congrats. I hope you're taking the time to reflect on this journey and be proud of what you've been able to create and share with others. Now, to turn the tables on you, I have a question for your 100th episode. If you could be a guest on any podcast, what podcast would that be and why?
That was a good question from my sister. I think I've listened to more and more podcasts, so it's slightly more difficult to answer this than before, but I think the overwhelming favorite is My First Million. Reason I like it is I kind of try to emulate or wanted to emulate that podcast in a certain way, but obviously it's a different flavor there. But I just love the fact that it feels like you're hanging out with friends, even though they have no idea who you are. And it's just kind of like a great listen as you're walking. So if I were to be a guest on a show, I think that would be the podcast.
Why did you decide to pursue entrepreneurship, which at the time, about a decade ago or so, many may have considered to be the road less traveled? You completed an engineering degree and an MBA degree from Rotman University of Toronto when you could have easily been hired by a top firm with a secure, well-paying income upon graduation. Was there a defining moment in your life where you knew you didn't want to be involved with a traditional style 9-to-5 type of role?
I think I had maybe the wrong impression, or things have changed as well. But I think looking back, didn't like the interviewing process. I didn't like the networking, like all these things that I thought, I looked at it as negative. It was like with a negative lens. So for me, it was like, I didn't want to just work at a big company and like not have any impact. There's definitely benefits to that, which is you're a cog in the machine. You can get a lot of learning from a big company. These are things I was not aware of. I kind of was with IBM, but it was more so like, this is kind of boring. I want to kind of have more impact or more say in the things I was working on, and I guess ownership of my time. And I think seeing my dad grow up and being an entrepreneur, like, running a restaurant, tough business, but kind of got to see him create jobs and, control his own experience, his time in a way. Even though he's quite busy, he was able to take us to like different classes, just things like that. So I think it was really two things. I think ownership of time, didn't want to just fit in because, graduating with the MBA program, it was like either finance, consulting, like entrepreneurship was like this, like, I think when I told people, I don't think they thought it was weird versus now, like, it's very accepted. There's like entrepreneurship programs and MBA programs and like engineering programs. But back then it wasn't really encouraged. So I kind of also liked that it was on the fringe. I like doing things where they're not like mainstream. If this was now, I probably wouldn't have got into entrepreneurship. So I think timing is one of those key things.
What would you say sparked your prioritization of ownership of time?
I didn't really understand the concept. I'm saying it looking back. That's what I was probably trying to articulate, but I knew that that's kind of something that I wanted. But I think the key was when I was working at a startup downtown Toronto, working at other startups, which is a great learning experience. But again, same thing. Felt I got to make more impact, but it was very demanding, and I was starting to develop or understand that my identity was not just the startup I worked at or the business I ran. It was there's other things that were important to me. So being in a startup and kind of the thing we were trying to solve at that time required me more time. And I just started to kind of get curious about how do I do the things I want when I want. And I think I stumbled across actually a friend of mine who worked at that same startup. He was always finding all these like interesting people, and like he was like my like go-to guy for finding these things. His name was Alfred. And I think he had sent me something about Mr. Money Mustache. I don't think he even read it though. I think he just like, oh, you might be interested based on what you're saying. I read it. I was like, wow, like this is legit. It wasn't like some made up thing. Like this guy actually did it. I know that when a lot of people think of that, they're like, oh, it's too hard and like all that. But the big thing Mr. Money Mustache said was delayed gratification. If you delay gratification by keeping your costs low, invest, you can gain more control of your time. Maybe not all of it, but like slowly you can kind of capture more and more of it. And there's other people I slowly discovered, Mr. 1500, and like buyer, like the FI movement is much more popular now. But again, back then it wasn't. So, and that was like whatever, almost 10 years ago. I think maybe less. But I think that's what sparked it. So thank you, Alfred.
Thank you, Alfred. Reaping the benefits. What is the FIRE movement? You mentioned it a lot in your previous podcast episodes, and it's clearly very important to you. Maybe your guests would like to learn a little bit about that.
Yeah, FIRE is basically stands for financially independent, retire early. And it doesn't mean like, oh, you're like rich or something like that. It just means it's like when people say lose weight, there's all these different semantics of how to lose weight, but the basic equation is you lose weight by burning more calories than you eat or consume. So it's the same thing for FIRE or like owning your time. One of the biggest, like just like with calories out and in, it's basically money in and money out. So you could make $500,000 a year, but if you're spending 600,000, you're still worse off than somebody making 40,000 and saving 20,000. So the idea was try to get your spend down as much as possible. So things like, if you have two cars, get down to one, or cut down on like consumption of like it's good for the environment as well, but like buying clothes or just buying stuff that is not really valuable. So just putting these rules in place to kind of cut down consumption, and on the other side, try to increase your income over time slowly. So I think the expense thing is the big focus for FIRE, but like there's like other movements in FIRE, like Fat FIRE, etc., that focus on the income part. But for me, it was really the expense part where it kind of really made me like look at like, wow, why am I spending all this? Like, why am I spending all this money on this stuff? And by doing that, I became healthier, spent less, things like that. So yes, that's why FIRE is important. And it's just really about ownership of time. You don't have to own all of it, but maybe it's you work a remote job. This is, before remote work, obviously with the pandemic, but like with remote work, or maybe like working part-time hours or working multiple jobs. It's just being creative in like how you made income so that you didn't waste time doing things you didn't want to do, like commuting or just things like that.
What would you say were the biggest changes you implemented when you learned about FIRE?
We went down to one car. So you got the car. I just decided to take like transit or like Uber, try to do more of my stuff remote. And by doing that, it actually made me more active because I didn't have the car. Like I would walk to the bus stop, or just walk to more places because I was like, oh, it's a short distance. And also by doing stuff more at home versus in the office, I would eat less junk food because when you're in the office, you want to like go out and get some like good lunch, or just spend more money than you need to. Versus at home, I can kind of control what I eat. I could sleep better. So it was just, I think, refocusing on health, cutting down with one car, and just learning more how to do more with what you have. I think most people get caught up with, oh, that's not possible, you need more of this or more of that. But it's like, no, I think the fundamental idea is what can you do with what you have, and then slowly kind of go from there. So I think those are like the really high level thought process changes that I made, plus like some practical stuff there. Yeah.
Was I easy to convince?
No, you were not, but I think because I listened to I didn't really listen to the podcast, but I read enough articles about this same conundrum of like one person believing in fire and like their spouse. Usually it was often male person that believes in like fire and their female or like, in a heterosexual relationship, a female spouse was the one that was like, we don't believe that. Like, let's not like why are we delaying gratification? Let's just go crazy and like spend. But I think just like anything, I think you're pretty open to learning new things. It wasn't like I had to like reframe my mind of it's not a bad thing you're questioning it because I could just be drinking the Kool-Aid and not like really thinking things through. So you asked some really good questions. So I mean, looking back, I think it like played out the way it's supposed to.
As someone who's entrepreneurial, you have many ventures: Tamil Culture, My Tamil Date, Continyou Care, The Tamil Creator, plus consulting for various startups. Interestingly, many of your ventures have Tamil in common. How connected do you feel to your Tamil identity?
I think growing up, I grew up around in a lot of very Tamil-centric areas. So Melbourne was heavy immigrants, a lot of Tamils. I mean, if you go to Scarborough even now, instead of a regular grocery store, there was like a Tamil grocery store every block. So I would say it was very like aware and like connected because of friends and like, the fact that you could speak Tamil. It was just like cool to be Tamil, not completely cool, but it was still cool. I'd say now it's like very in. But obviously I think as I became part of TamilCulture.com, I think obviously it grows because it's like a cycle. You meet more and more people and like you just become more and more kind of connected to your roots because culture at the end of the day is just kind of a shared experience. So different people have different experiences. So just meeting a bunch of different people, you get a different interpretations of like what it means to be Tamil. So yeah.
So any trips to Sri Lanka in our near future?
Maybe.
Can you describe your endeavors and how they came about?
Yeah, TamilCulture.com was started by me and a friend of mine. Oh, actually, I joined. My friend Shiv started it, and then I kind of came on board later. My Tamil date was actually because I think we started getting inquiries from people about we were like showcasing stories about the global Tamil community or just like Tamils, and I guess people came to us like we started getting inquiries about like matchmaking in a way, and we didn't really have anything. But I think somebody had suggested that idea of like a dating site, and then we just kind of decided that was something that was the next natural step. So that's kind of how my Tamil date came to be. And yeah, the Tamil Creator podcast, which you're kind of listening to, is really more of a personal project, especially during COVID when like socialization was like pretty hard. So this is kind of my way to connect with interesting people. And since I have a lot of connections that are already Tamil, I thought that's going to be the logical place to kind of start with my podcasting foray. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into those, I guess, quote unquote Tamil things.
Tell us about Continyou Care.
Continyou Care was started with a Tamil friend of mine, Tavis. Me and him were at a Boston Pizza. We were kind of just having dinner. I forgot what the experience was, but I think we were waiting for our food a bit longer than usual. And he's like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we can just kind of skip, the steps they have for like taking your order and just go straight to like ordering what we want and control our experience. I was like, yeah, that'd be great. He's like, yeah, I want to like do something like that. I was like, oh, like, and I think I just suggested that he do it. And I think he started like creating a prototype and wireframing with like some other folks, or like he approached some other folks. It didn't work out. And then he came to me and he asked if I was interested. And I was like, yeah, why not? And, I think we tried that for a couple of years in the restaurant space. It didn't really work out because good product, wrong market. We got featured in the Toronto Star as Innovation of the Year. And I think a senior home saw the newspaper article or whatever it was, and reached out to us to say, hey, can you come create this or customize what you have for the senior home market? We were not interested. It didn't seem like a great opportunity, but then we took it. And yeah, we just realized by doing that first pilot with them that there was something there. It was very painful growth, but I think with anything, if you stick with it long enough, you find success. They say most businesses don't fail because, well, I mean, some are bad ideas, but if there's something there, it's usually because you give up. We didn't, and yeah, I think the business has been growing okay, especially the last couple of years. So we'll just continue to stick with that and continue at a high level. We basically digitize anything that used to be pen and paper in a home. We start with dining. So if you picture the dining experience, somebody takes the order, they write it down on a piece of paper, and they walk over to the kitchen. There's room for mistakes, inefficiencies. Data isn't kept in terms of like long-term trends around what residents want. So we basically really focus on the dining experience to make things smoother, faster, and document kind of what was actually happening so that homes could have a better sense of how to improve their operations. Things went smoothly, less mistakes were being made. And then we took that idea of digitizing paper and pen in senior homes, and we took it to other areas as other parts of homes. But the core thing we focus on is digitizing paper and pen process in dining rooms in senior homes across Canada. It's not the sexiest idea, but it's like, I think a lot of great ideas, or not great ideas, but a lot of good ideas in businesses, which is just like a insight that you get either accidentally or purposefully, and then you just kind of find product market fit and you just try to grow it. So that's what we've been doing.
Did you get to meet Kevin O'Leary along this journey? Why don't you share that?
Well, I met him very briefly. Me and Davis met him at the awards night for the Innovation of the Year. At that time, he thought our idea was really cool, which was like 10 years ago or whatever it was. And he said, you got to keep going. And he was actually like much nicer than I think I've heard that a lot. He's much nicer than his TV personality. And unrelated, we didn't meet Kevin O'Leary, but we actually auditioned for Dragon's Den. I forgot the version. It's not like the main one, but it's like another like version of it, because actually one of the guests from the podcast, the Tamil Creator podcast, Priscilla, she actually was a producer on the Dragon's Den at that point, and they were looking for another company to kind of come and pitch, and we did, and we got grilled, but it was a fulfilled a dream of mine, which was to audition for the show. So yeah.
That's so cool. So clearly you're wearing many hats. How do you manage your time balancing work, passion projects, and your personal life? I mean, I'm truly confused and blown away by the fact that you can be so productive in your office, working away, but then be present for bath time or medical appointments for our kids. Do you have any tips or tricks for those who want to be more efficient with their time?
I think a couple of things. One is, if it's not in your calendar, it doesn't exist. So try to put as many things in your calendar as possible so you can free up your mind to not think about those things or have to remember. So whether it's social or for the kids or for business, put everything in the calendar. Number two is focus on the thing you're doing. So if you're with family, friends, like in our case, when we're parenting, just do that thing. Don't think about work. And when you're doing work, don't think about like anything else. I think that allows me to do different things, because I kind of have a schedule for how I focus on different tasks, or how I like at least prioritize or know what to do. And I think just things like just organizing your to-do list for the day ahead, a day ahead of time, clearing your calendar of like things that you can move so that it's not so packed. So just small things like that, I think that really help me manage my time. And I think I do like a lot less than I used to. I think activity is not the same as productivity. So yeah.
When you do something, you just do it, as the Nike slogan. For example, I remember the day you told me you wanted to do the podcast, and then within a few weeks, you did it. Not to mention that this was a mere few months after having our twins. Where does your drive come from, and how do you do it?
I don't know if it comes from somewhere. I think it's more so one of the things I've always wanted to embody was, if I said I was going to do something, I would do it, versus, I think a lot of people say they're going to do something and they don't. So it's just one of the things that for me personally, I want to embody. And now that I have kids, even more so kind of really embody that, just be a person of your word. Even the podcast, if I didn't enjoy it, or like, I don't know, it really sucked, at least I tried. So I think not being afraid of failure allows me just to kind of try things. I'm not going to try every little thing I think of, but this was just something that I was sitting on, and like I just wrote it down, I documented it, and when it felt like the time was right, and the guests from episode 1, I'm with the Learns, they were awesome, and they offered to be my guinea pig. And I think once you have somebody reach out, I think I talked about, maybe I didn't, but I think having some kind of accountability really helps in kind of getting things done. If you know that somebody's counting on you or relying on the fact that you said you're going to do something, I think it kind of pushes you to do things. So I think just not to be afraid of failure, having accountability, and writing down everything you think of, but not acting on everything as well.
What's that quote you told me once about, like, it's like you're like, it's easy to have an idea, but
Oh yeah, I'm saying obviously a good idea is still worth something, but you can have an A+ idea, but if you have no execution or B+ execution, it's not going to go anywhere. Versus like a mediocre idea, executed well, could be a really good business, or just turn out well, whatever it is.
do you ever experience dad guilt as an entrepreneur? If so, how do you overcome this? I recall you asking this to guest Shamini Warren from episode 99.
I think, I don't know if there's a thing as dad guilt. I feel like there's definitely mom guilt because of how society's kind of constructed, and like women are typically the ones taking care of kids and they're not really encouraged to run businesses and all that stuff. I don't think dads get the same pressure. I think we get like a lot more credit than we probably deserve for doing the same things as moms, but I definitely get guilt when I'm thinking about something, even though it's like I just told you, focus on what you're supposed to do when you're with your kids, but obviously you're human, and there's definitely been times when I've been thinking about work and been frustrated or something, and it's taken out in the experience with the kids, so that makes me guilty. It makes me feel guilty. But I think it's just remembering that we're all imperfect, flawed human beings. We're a work in progress, so when I make those mistakes, just trying to get better next time and not to be hard on myself. Um, I think that's how I get over quote unquote dad guilt, is trying to be as present as possible for those moments, like whenever we do stuff with the kids. And if I do make mistakes because of work or just something else I'm preoccupied with and I'm not fully attentive, then just remind myself the next time, I gotta be better.
What has been a learning lesson, as you coin it, that you've experienced in the last 3 to 5 years, and what was your takeaway from it?
I think the big learning lesson, I was kind of already doing it, but I think it's two things. One is productivity, not activity. It's the same thing as it's better to do less things, but do them well. So I think that's one. I guess it's not really a mistake, but I think I've made mistakes by taking on too much. So the thing to reverse that is just try to focus on less things so I can do them well and be more present in like just general life. Number two is I think when disagreeing with somebody, I think just giving myself and that person space and trying to be empathetic, I think, because when you're in an argument, whether it's with yourself or like just any other folks, it's not really productive to kind of keep feeding the fire. If you get into an argument, it's better to de-escalate and try to see if there's a solution that can, be beneficial for both parties. Because I've definitely made the mistake of like sometimes just escalating fights when it wasn't needed, just to be right or whatever the case might be.
In the 12 plus years of knowing you, I have to say you know a lot of people, as you call it, relationship building. How do you go about networking?
Yeah, I definitely did this a lot better pre-kids, and especially I think even just before that. I think I felt like I don't know what age it was, maybe as I got to my 30s, I kind of slowed down with that. But I think the idea is just to be authentic. When I'm building relationships with people, friends, business contacts, whatever the case might be, you actually don't know what that person will be in your life. So just really meet somebody interesting that aligns with some level of things that you think about. It's just giving more than you're taking. I think I've seen people like quote unquote network, like they'll reach out on LinkedIn or something, and it's just like they're immediately asking for something, which is good in a way that they're being direct, but it's also, how can you add value, or like how can you position or at least think about if you're asking somebody something, what is in it for them? So just trying to be authentic and trying to give as much as I can before I ask, if I do ask anything. Sometimes I don't even ask. Like I think I find joy in also the giving as well. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, I guess. But I think I think this is how you build relationships. I think you try to really give and give value to the other person, and with the expectation of not getting anything back. It's almost like a gift. Right? You give a gift because you're not expecting anything back. So I think it's similar to relationship building.
So, as we previously stated, you know a lot of people, which is probably why you successfully recruited 100 individuals to sit down to a podcast interview with you. Some even know you as Tamil Nelly. Can you tell that story?
Oh boy.
Actually, I think we're getting a call from someone.
Hey, happy listeners of the Tamil Creator Podcast. This is Vas Saranga jumping in, guest from episode 44. So I'm no stranger to this podcast or my best friend Ara, who has been my friend for over 20 years and my bestie. Just wanted to jump in with a little bit of story time about our gracious host here. So in high school, Ara actually earned the coveted nickname Tamil Nelly. Now, if you don't know who Nelly is, he is a Southern rapper slash singer slash actor slash artist. Country Grammar is one of his major albums, I believe. But one thing he was known for was having this unique look. I think he had a grill and, he had a nice lineup and stuff, but he had a little Band-Aid or bandage on his face, a little tiny one of those tiny ones just across his cheek. And it was actually a fashion statement. So when I first met Ara, it was in calculus class, and this was sort of an advanced placement class. We were in grade 12, but we were a little smarter than most. He wouldn't like me saying that, and no, we weren't smarter than most. We just like to think it. So we were in this advanced placement class, and most of the time we were just goofing off. But this is where Ara and I connected and became best friends. And Ara showed up to class. It was, when it was warm in September, he was wearing like a full, like a toque beanie, like a winter coat, and he had this Band-Aid on his face. And so I thought, okay, this dude with his winter gear in basically summer, that's part of his look, he's styling. But I thought he had a cut on his face, and so did a lot of people. Then a couple of weeks go by, a couple of months go by, and I'm like, buddy, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm chilling, man. Yo, I'm chilling, dog. Ara used to kind of talk that way back in the day. I don't know what his issue was. Just kidding. Most of us did, growing up in Scarborough in high school in the early 2000s. But turns out that at one point I was like, yeah, you're that cut on your face, is that not healing properly? And he's like, what cut? What do you mean? And then I'm like, so hold on. You have a Band-Aid on your face, right? And he's like, nope. Just doesn't say anything. Just doesn't respond. He's just smiling. And I'm like, wait. Are you about that country grammar? Is that a fashion statement? And this dude just keeps smiling. Sometimes Ara just doesn't respond, and he just smiles, that charisma, that smile where he doesn't have to actually confirm or deny what was going on. So he earned the nickname Tamil Nelly. Now back to the podcast.
So, what words of wisdom would you bestow upon 16-year-old Tamil Nelly from Scarborough Ara?
There'd be a few things, but I think the one that really sticks out is just be true to yourself. I mean, embrace kind of who you were. Well, it's cool to be in the in crowd or cool, like be part of the cool kids. I think it's perfectly fine to just find your community people, even if it's on the fringe. So just be comfortable in your own skin. Things shall pass. I think, when you're that young, you think that your life at that point is kind of, you can't really see too far in the future or kind of imagine the possibilities because your world is so small. It's kind of like everyone in that school. Because I don't really do much outside of school because my parents were strict. So my viewpoints were like school was like my world, but like obviously when I graduated and like went to university and all that stuff, the world kind of became much bigger. So I think those are the two things. Be true to yourself, like as in be comfortable in your own skin, and everything like this too shall pass. Like nothing is permanent, whether it's good or bad. So yeah, those are the two things.
For me, selfishly, this is a far way away in our future, but in terms of personal legacy, describe how you want to be remembered by your family and friends.
I think this is an easy one for me, but it took a long time to kind of really realize it. I think it's 5 statements. I want to be good husband, good father, good brother, son, and friend. So I think those are the 5 things that I want to kind of embody. I think those encapsulate other things as well, like try to be generous, try to be other-centeredness, all those things. But I think that comes by being in a relationship with people. So if I just focus on those 5 things, I think, and also like try to help other people when I can. So I think those are the things how I would want to be remembered by people.
We had an audience question, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask it. So why are you so dedicated and invested in showcasing Tamils in society?
Obviously, being Tamil myself, I can identify, and it's just interesting to have this common thing with a bunch of people and just, sharing their stories with the world. Because a lot of the stories I think I'll share, it might not be quote unquote like big stories or in terms of the people, but I find their stories fascinating. I find them fascinating. Usually it's either I know them personally or like I just been following them on like social media and I'm just curious about them. And I think I ask great questions and I think I ask questions that people are already thinking. So it's almost like public service in a way where like selfishly I get to talk to really interesting people and ask questions that that are more acceptable in podcast form versus like in a normal conversation. And people get to hear these conversations at scale because of the podcast. And I think that's kind of why I do it.
Well, I'm sure this audience is grateful for it. And with that, that is a great way to segue into a fun speed round you like to call Creator Confessions. You know how it works. First thing that comes to mind. You ready?
Yep.
Favorite Tamil food?
Mutton biryani with a boiled egg and mutton curry and onion salad.
What's one thing you haven't tried yet in your life that you can't wait to try?
Get a 6-pack.
Down. What is your biggest fear?
I think death, but if I think about it, it's like I'm scared of lightning, snakes, and heights. So yes, I guess all related to death in some way.
What is an insecurity of yours?
That I spend a lot of time on things, but I haven't seen the value. Like other people wouldn't see the value of what I'm delivering.
Favorite movie of all time?
English would be Gladiator, and Tamil would be Kannathamuttal, I think. Yeah. I love Mani Ratnam movies, and I think that was my favorite.
Can you say the name again?
No.
Are you the Tamil Creator Podcast? I thought it was American History X.
That's one of them, but I'd say, I have a lot. American History X is one too. Great, actually, it was a great movie, but Gladiator.
Really?
Also, because I was on the bandwagon 5 years later, because I remember telling Vas, he's like, yo, that came out in theater 4 years ago. I was like, oh, this is the best movie ever. He's like, that was 4 years ago.
Sounds like you. Tough question for you, Ara. Fellow Tamil creator you want to big up?
I gotta give a shout out to my fellow Wolvernites, I guess, Vas and Kamuta.
Both podcast guests.
Yes.
Do you know which episodes?
No.
Come on.
No.
Favorite childhood memory?
There's a lot of small little childhood memories, but I think I always tell the story because it's funny. It's with my brother Deepan, and it's so him. We used to go to Tamil class every Saturday morning, which is the worst time to go because of all the great cartoons and stuff we could be doing at that time. But I actually met my childhood best friend at, I think it was in Tamil school, Raj, or maybe it was earlier. But I think we were going one time and my brother was really tired. He's always tired. He doesn't like to wake up early. And you have to picture Deepan, those of you know him now, he's this cool guy. But when he was younger, he was this chubby little, cute little kid. And he was just sleepy. And I remember my dad saying, okay, everyone, I did everyone get out. You gotta go to class. And me and I think my other brother Cal, or maybe it was just me and Deepan, I forgot. But we got out and Deepan was still sleepy. And then my dad was basically yelling at him in Tamil, "Hey, wake up." And or Limugo. And my brother wasn't so to wake him up. And then my dad was yelling at him, but my brother wasn't really phased. He was just kind of he was just saying the funniest line, which was study, study, study. That's all we ever do. And then he kind of just slowly trudges out of the car, even though my dad's yelling at him. It was just the funniest, one of the funniest stories. It just sticks with me. It's just a funny thing. I can't really think of a lot of other. There's a few other stories, but I feel that's a one that pops into my head.
What do you do outside of work for fun?
I like to play ultimate frisbee, watch basketball, watch sports, watch movies, hang out with of course my beautiful wife Claudia and my sweet little twins Shay and Zakai and friends. Yeah, I like to learn, read. I like to do a lot of stuff outside of work.
If you could only watch one sport for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I would say usually it would be a no-brainer basketball, but football is also awesome because of every game means something and the playoffs are crazy. But I would still have to say slightly basketball.
If you could only play one sport for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Ultimate frisbee, because I feel I could play it longer. Basketball is very physical, and I haven't played it in since the kids were born. So, and I like ultimate frisbee. That's the key thing. Things change in life. 5 years ago, basketball in a second, but I love ultimate frisbee.
5 years from now, pickleball.
Yeah, maybe.
What's something you could benefit from caring less about?
Not really much I could benefit from caring less about, actually. Yeah, I can't think of anything.
That's because he literally doesn't worry about anything. What decision have you been putting off for a while?
To get into shape, better shape.
I co-sign. A recent purchase you splurged on that you have no regret about?
I don't really splurge on stuff, except maybe the microphone that I bought to do this podcast, or maybe some running shoes or walking shoes because I walk a lot and listen to podcasts. But yeah, I don't really splurge.
I can vouch for that. He doesn't splurge. It was kind of a ridiculous question to pose to Ara. Person or celebrity you admire?
Pop-out answer, I'll say my parents. I think a lot of kids, or I hope a lot of kids would say that. But yeah, there's definitely like people, there's bits and pieces of different people that I respect or like want to steal from. But I would just say my parents, but there's definitely things I admire about like different people.
What do you admire about your parents?
I think it's just a typical thing, like, they came to, like, I think just, it's crazy thinking about it because you don't really think about it. But now that I'm a parent, it's like pretty crazy. It's like me moving to like, I don't know, like they literally moved here without like Google Maps, without like knowing anything about Canada, except that other Tamil people immigrated here. They didn't know the language. I think my dad like knew English, but not obviously as well as he knows it now. My mom didn't, like, still doesn't, her English isn't as strong, but like they basically came here on a whim with, like, again, it's not, my parents are not unique, but with little money they like set up 4 kids for success. Like we've done things that they can only probably imagine, and just that it's super hardworking. Like they're still like, my dad has helped a lot. Like the immigrant community helps, like helps each other out a lot. I've seen my dad help out a lot of people. It's like funny, you notice that people that don't have the most, like people that have the least are often the most generous. And I saw that with like my parents as well. And again, their stories are unique, but I just want to like highlight that I like those are all the things you see. And you don't really realize how much it impacts you subconsciously until you get older, and then like you start doing things that your parents do. Like there's one thing I like to do that my mom does. Like she likes to feed the squirrels and like seagulls and all these random like animals, and like I realized I do that, but it's because I saw my mom do it, and like I didn't realize that I was picking up on it. But when I see a squirrel or animal, I want to like feed the animal, or I do this thing that she does when she talks to squirrels by making these sounds. I do the same thing. So, anyways, that's what I admire about my parents.
Do you want to demo the sound for the I do have to say that I've been blessed with the most amazing in-laws. And I think the biggest things I admire about them are that they are not judgmental and they are very content with everything as it is. And they don't have expectations of other people or even their children, which is a really interesting thing to learn now that I'm a parent, because you have to remember that your kid's job is not to make you happy, and you have to be happy regardless. And so I think that's very freeing, that lesson that I learned from your parents. So I'm going like, don't have expectations of them. And I think they did that well with all 4 of you, letting you guys live your life. Okay, we're almost done this speed round, which is not really a speed round. A regret you would have if you were going to die tomorrow.
I didn't spend enough time with friends and family.
Age you want to retire.
40.
Favorite book or podcast that has had an impact on you.
I think James Clear. How did I forget the title?
Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits, yeah.
A new belief, behavior, or habit that's most improved your life.
Trying to get more sleep regularly.
PSA or advice for aspiring fellow Tamil creators.
I think just whatever you think you're doing, try it. Be willing to fail. Find your circle of supporters. It's good to have that. Doesn't have to be a big circle. It's just got to be the right circle. Yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. So after recording 100 episodes for the Tamil Creator, and I cannot say that lightly, what is the ideal state of the podcast? Or perhaps what's in the pipeline, Ara? Is there a goal you're aiming for, such as reaching 10K, 1 million subscribers? Are you running for Prime Minister? Spill the beans, Ara.
I don't have any goals. I think it's just, this started off with small ambitions. It's just really capture conversations that I was already having at scale. Continue to be curious, and like there might be a time when I just don't feel like doing it anymore, but no real goals right now.
Okay, we do have another question coming in. Just one moment here.
Vas Saranga here, chiming in to ask Ara a question on this very special 100th episode of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I think it's absolutely phenomenal that Claudia is interviewing you, Ara, because you are the man, the myth, the legend, and we all want to hear from you, okay? So imagine this. None of the other streams of businesses that you are pursuing are on your radar anymore. The podcast is it. It's the only thing that you have going on. You're putting all your working time and effort into it, of course, enjoying life and having a great work-life balance and traveling and doing wonderful things with your family and your kids and your wife and all that jazz, but the podcast is it, all right? It's your full-time job. What does it look like? Where do you do it? Where do you record it? Is it video? Are you traveling to people? What are the topics? What countries do you visit? What do you cover? I'd love to know. I'd love to know how the podcast would look if it was the thing, the only thing. Hit us with some thoughts, Ara.
Good question, buddy. I think I would say, I mean, I want to reiterate that this podcast is kind of still me learning. I haven't figured out even like 10% or whatever it is I need to figure out to kind of do this, but I think I would want to like learn video, maybe go on site and travel and meet some guests. Like there might be various versions of this podcast, or like this might be the starting point. It might evolve to other ones. So I think if I was just focusing on just this podcast, it would be maybe like several different podcast topics, maybe video. Like I haven't really, like, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect answer, but I think that's what I would probably do, is I have like a lot of different ideas of storytelling and how I want to share that. So I think this would be the starting point, but there's like so many different angles I can go. But I'd love to do in person. I would love to do video. I think learning is awesome, and I'd love to just kind of learn how to get better at those different aspects as well.
Well, that's just about a wrap. Thank you so much, Ara, for taking the time to join us as a guest on the Tamil Creator Podcast. The bigger the guest, the harder to recruit, I guess. You were a great guest, and I'm sure the listeners enjoyed the role reversal. For people who want to reach you, where can they find you? Just kidding. They all know it's at the Tamil Creator on Instagram. Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say to your guests who have been along for this 100 episode ride with you?
Oh, I mean, for all the guests, the ones that I'm friends with, I know well, and the ones that I just met as a result of the podcast, thank you guys for jumping on and sharing your story. You know, I've heard lots of stories of people being motivated or like excited by the stories they hear. So just a big thank you, and thank you for sharing your story and kind of coming along for the ride to inspire people globally.
Yeah, I think I'll just reiterate that. And thank you, everyone from all over the world who has either been a guest or has listened to the last 100 episodes and this very special 100th episode of the Tamil Creator Podcast. For those of you who are unaware, Ara will be taking a short hiatus. So all I can say is stay tuned. And Ara, any last words?
No, I think you got it.
Okay. On to the next one.